Hey, hello. Good evening, everybody. Hope all of you are staying safe during this pandemic. Um, I know it's the CMCO now for certain places in Malaysia, but I hope this does not stop you from taking the CFA exam. Oh, by the way, I am Michelle from Summites. I'm the main coordinator for CFA program. In some tests. Well, basically, without further ado, please allow me to invite our CFA gurus, Mr. Darren Degraaf, who is joining us from Vancouver. Darren, are you there?
Hey, welcome, folks. How's everybody doing?
Hey, are you awake already?
Working on my third cup of coffee. Well, tea, actually.
Oh dear. Okay, so tonight actually we will also have Mr. Beng Hui, the chairman of AB Maximus, who is joining us from Singapore. Mr. Beng Hui will join us in the Q&A session later and also the closing for our session tonight. So, Darren, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this. I'll share my screen.
Okay, right. The floor over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. All right. So as Michelle mentioned, Darren Degraaf here. While I'm doing this, I'm going to grab my screen here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to pull this over. Okay. So I just have a blank screen here. Can everyone see that just to confirm? So Michelle, can you confirm just to make sure everyone can see that? Or Beng Hui? Because I just want to make sure that people can see my screen before I continue. Can you folks hear me? Okay, great, excellent. Okay, all right. So just have a couple generic things I want to throw up here, but really I want this to be driven in the Q&A. Perhaps I will some of the things I share will stimulate your appetites in that regard. Anyway, one of the there are a couple of like contentious things. Some folks wonder, when you're studying for the exam or preparing for the exam, does new content make its way onto the exam? So I know actually Beng Hui and I fielded this question like 100 times over. That's something actually that I'd actually like to get some of his thoughts on as well. But that's actually the way that question can be answered is to be thought of is when are the questions written, at least historically. Of course, things may have changed somewhat now, but historically, the exams would have been written, let's say, in the third quarter in the previous year. So if you can kind of think back to what was happening at that time. So when the folks were heading off to Charlottesville, Virginia, or maybe I guess doing it remotely now, is maybe what were some of the hot topics that were going on. So like in ethics, for example, you look back and you think, okay, well, what was happening in the news? We had things like General Electric. You have what's that real estate kind of optimization, WeWork, and some of the corporate governance issues that may have been going on that could make its way into maybe a corporate governance or perhaps make into an interesting ethics case. So one of the things is hot topics. Maybe if I'm going to just write that down. So hot topics is something that you want to think about. Again, we'll never know, right? Because it would be a violation if I told you what I saw, or if Beng Hui told you what we saw when we wrote the exam, whether or not that actually made it in. But I could say generically that there were. I felt like in the year before, and I can't say what the topic was, there were some hot topics that came through, and definitely I saw them on my exams. So the other thing to think about is the high weightage. So what are the high weightage? Well, I just double checked the CFA website just to be sure. And do we have a chat box going on there? If there's a chat box, I want to throw it out there just to make this a little bit interactive. So Michelle, can you confirm? That's one thing with this new system I wasn't sure of. If there is, could you folks chime in with your thoughts? Does anyone know what the high weightage topics are? at level 1? What do we have? Maybe this is something that can come out during the Q&A then. Okay, so I'll just start off in case that's locked down or you don't have access to a chat. First one is FRA. Now, what's interesting, and Bing Ho, you might find this interesting as well, is that they've really changed things a fair bit. Like they have bands now. Like before it was a straight 15, but FRA can be anywhere between 13 to 17. And then we have, not necessarily in any particular order, but we have equity, which sits at, what do we got, 10 to 12%. These are all in percentages. And then corporate finance. So corporate finance comes in a little bit lighter at 8 to 12. And then another one I want to throw in here is ethics. And I'm going to talk about ethics in a little bit more in just a second. But ethics comes in at a whopping 15 to 20. Wow. Okay, so a couple of things that we usually talk about. So here's one. And then I want to talk about these three bad boys together. And then another thing I want to talk about is just simply ethics. Ethics, there are three main reasons why you want to focus on ethics. The first one is just simply the weightage, right? So the weight, it's just worth so much, 15 to 20%. And then the second thing to note is that it's the first topic that historically, now this is something from the Institute, so I'm not speaking out of school here, as they say. So it's the first, let's say, and okay, before it was 180 questions, or sorry, 240, now 180. Let's see, 180 times 0.2. So potentially you could see 36 questions on ethics. So 18 in the morning and 18 in the afternoon. And if they stick with how they historically used to do it, and this is something that the CFA disclosed to me when I contacted them, so it's okay to say this, that it historically has been the first topic. So don't expect like you're going to get one question on ethics, one question on FRA, one question on equity. What you should expect, and again, things can change, but what you should expect is to see anywhere close to 18 ethics questions, boom, right off the bat. In the morning, as it were, or in the afternoon. The timing's off a little bit different now, but we used to say morning and afternoon. So I'll just continue to use that terminology. Okay, and then the other thing about ethics. So again, another thing is it's your first topic. That's what you should expect. Your first topic for the first portion and the second portion. Now the third bullet, we're just running out a little bit of space here, is about the minimum passing score. Now this is something the Institute still continues to talk about, so it's okay that we do as well, is that if you're what they call a borderline candidate, so let's say the minimum passing score is, I'm just going to say 65. I don't know. So that now this is contentious as well. So just stick with me. Let's just say the minimum passing score is 65. They don't disclose anymore how they do that. Now we do have some information on how they used to do it, but I have to be careful how I present that. So just assuming a minimum passing score of 65, let's say you score, I don't know, like a 63. Now we don't know how low they go, but if you do really well in ethics, like let's say you just kill ethics, you get over like 80% or whatever a good score in ethics might be. Generally, it's thought that if it's over 70, that would be a good score. So we'll just go with that. So if you do well in ethics, then they can actually overall give you a pass, even though you didn't actually hit that, targeted or calculated, I should say, maybe it's better, calculated minimum passing score of 65. Now, of course, it's a double-edged sword. So if you score, let's say 67%, but you just really stink up the room, as they say in ethics, then they could pull you down and you could actually end up failing the paper overall. Now, just to clarify, just to demystify a couple of things, some rumors that are sometimes out there is that no, if you fail ethics, no, overall, if you can score, let's say a 70%, you're probably going to be okay. Now, I say probably, I really want to say 100%. You're going to be okay, but I always have to give myself that side door in case the Institute has kind of like changed the way they do things. Okay, so again, speculation only about the minimum passing score. Now, the way they used to do it, they used to take X% of, let's say, the top decile. So if the top gunners out there, the ballers, if they score 90, so let's say the institute says, okay, we're going to take 70% of the best of the best of the best, then you guessed it, your minimum passing score 63. But again, they don't disclose any longer how they do that. So right now it's just speculation, but people I respect still believe that they follow a similar, if not the same, methodology. But again, that's just speculation. But I would go with that. It kind of makes sense that it would be that way. So, and it's probably the best way to think of it. Okay. All right. Now, I've put parentheses here on these three topics here. We have FRA, we have equity, and we have corporate finance. So why? Why do I put them together? Because this is what we like to call core, as opposed to secondary or trivial. There's a lot of core material in these three topics. Not only that, look at them together, right? So if you average and say that's 15, 10, and 10, maybe even more, you're looking at almost like 35 to 40%. Okay, so what do we got? That's 23. Let's say 30, 31 to, what do we got there? 43 potentially, or 41. There we go. So basically, you're looking at maybe like, I don't know, 35%, I guess you could say on average there. So that's a lot. That's a pretty heavy weightage. And then you throw ethics in there, you've almost got yourself a pass. Of course, if you were to get 100%, which we wouldn't, but so even just in terms of weightage, it's a good strategy. But I think just as importantly, or maybe more importantly, is that these concepts here are core. Now, they're not only core at level 1, they're also core at level 2 as well. So is ethics. Ethics drops a little bit in weightage. The others here, they stay pretty much the same in terms of the weightage at level 2. So you put in the time now, it'll pay dividends theoretically down the line. Now, Binghoi and I can maybe speak about this a little bit more during the Q&A, but there's another myth out there. Like, again, there's a myth that if you fail ethics, you're going to fail the exam. No, there's a rumor that somebody out in Singapore has aced the exam, or Malaysia. No. It's a good rumor, believable when I tell it in North America. Oh yeah, if it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be probably Singapore. Yeah, they would probably do it. No, it's never been confirmed that anyone's ever aced the exam. Another one, okay, is just simply that, that when you're writing the exam, in terms of the content, again, a couple things about the hot topics is that there's no guarantee that hot topics are going to make their way into the exam. That's something to be careful as well. Okay, and then another thing I want to mention about the FRA, equity, and corporate finance is that there's a lot of overlap between them. Okay, there's a lot of overlap between them, and again, at level 1 and level 2, the point I was trying to make is that the other kind of like myth is that level 2 is the hardest exam. Maybe it is. So again, Binghoi and I can talk about that a little bit later. But if it is the case that level 2 is the hardest, I personally found level 3 the hardest. But a lot of people say level 2. Why is level 2 the hardest? Because I think maybe some college students, fresh out of uni or whatever, they tend to do well, from my experience, on the exam on level 1. And then I think they kind of coast a little bit at level 2. Is like, look at me, I passed level 1. I only put in like, I don't know, 100 or 200 hours, maybe even less if you're a fresh grad right out of finance. Or maybe some of our engineering students, they tend to do quite well with less study time than others, or maybe an accountant who's decided to take the CFA program, because again, you got a lot of accounting here. Again, it's just a rumor that level 2 is the hardest. But if it is true, I believe it's because a lot of the basics, a lot of the core stuff in FRA and equity and corporate finance, yeah, at level 1, where it's like single shot multiple choice, maybe you can get through the exam. At level 2, when you're looking at vignettes, these cases, very long, 2-3 pages, followed by used to be 6 questions, but anywhere between 4 and 6. that some students might be quite challenged by that. Okay, now when I say core, let me give you an example. In FRA, we learned something called, let's see, return on equity. Now, again, I'll just test the chat box. Don't know if you have access to it, but the return on equity, if you multiply it by a certain variable, that's going to give you your sustainable or long-term kind of organic a growth rate. Or let's just stick with organic growth rate. So the answer to that, if you happen to be studying right now, is that's going to be your earnings retention rate. Now, ROE, of course, we learned how to calculate in FRA, but this growth rate, we use it in corporate finance. We use it in equity when we do valuation. Now, where do we use it in corporate finance? Well, that's when we're forecasting our future cash flows. So if they give you today's sales and they say the growth rate is 10%, so if you have to forecast next year's sales, you would just take today's sales and gross them up by 1 plus G. Now, if we were valuing a stock, then you would see it in your intrinsic value calculation. So your intrinsic value equals D0 times 1 plus G over R minus G. So again, if you want to value a stock, this is just the single or constant growth model, but you also use it in the multi-step, or sorry, a multi-growth or non-constant growth as well. So understanding a lot of the concepts in FRA also can help you in other areas like equity and corporate finance. Now, another connecting point, for example, in equity, what is our discount rate, the required return on equity? Well, we actually see that appear again in corporate finance. Okay, so and that's by way of the CAPM model, and also we see it in another study session. I'll put it over here, which is portfolio management, where we start getting into the CML and the SML. Now, you might remember that the SML is a visual representation of, you guessed it, the CAPM model. And get this, folks, even in alternative investments, not at level 1, but at level 2, we learn that there are a number of different ways to value, let's say, real estate. And usually it's going to be some type of net operating income over some type of what they call a cap rate. Now, that cap rate is equal to R minus G. So again, even in alternative investments, we have to understand what G is, how do we calculate G, where does R come from? Normally that would be from our CAPM model. And then also what is net operating income, right? Which would be like your EBIT, after-tax EBIT, and then sometimes there might be some adjustments there as well. Like in real estate, you'd make adjustments for, or to get to that number, you'd make adjustments for whether or not you have full vacancy, whether you have parking lot revenue or concession revenue and things like that. But it all comes back from accounting, sales less your expenses. So I guess a big takeaway here is when you're studying for the exam, is make sure that you take up some type of a revision that where the instructor will go over the high weightage topics, particularly those that have a lot of overlap. Because folks, in topics like statistics, you have time value of money, and then you also have like hypothesis testing, and then you got some random crap, right? Like Chebyshev's inequality. They start getting into like different types of distributions like Poisson or continuous or random distributions. And the worst is like econ. Okay. Now, one year, let's see, a couple of years ago, one of my students actually stacked up the econ textbook, as it were, and compared it to the equity. And what they found was that the content in econ was about twice as thick as the content for equity. Now, the weightage is pretty much the same. It's around you should expect to see around 10% for for econ, as well as for equity. So pound for pound, as it were, like the return on investment for econ is just terrible. So when I teach, actually, what I do is I put econ at the very end. And some students wonder, why do you put econ at the very end? It's fundamental. I'm like, yeah, it is. But it's, first of all, it's a terrible return on investment when you're trying to be efficient, especially when you get into the final few months of your revision. And there you are farting around trying to increase your performance on econ. Really, really bad strategy. And I'll tell you why. Weightage and a terrible return on investment, pound for pound, it's not a very good use of your time. A couple other things. And when I was teaching at the local uni here in Vancouver the other day, one of my students reminded me of this. He said, Darren, you know what? Because he's also prepping, I guess, for the CFA exams, is that he says, Darren, he says, what's frustrating is that the terminology that they use in the econ section is different than when we learn econs at the college, right, at the uni level. Another term, okay, a good example might be the money market. So again, when we think of money market, what do we think? We think short term, right? Not capital markets, right? Not long term, like stocks and bonds. We think like short term, right? Bankers acceptance, maybe overnight repo and or whatever, things like that, short term stuff. Well, in the econ section, the money market has to do more like with the money supply and things like that. So the terminology can be different from what you see in other parts of the CFA program, like the example I just gave you, or just simply different from how you learned it at college or the uni level. The other thing about econ that's frustrating is that sometimes the calculations are different than how we learned it in college. For example, the own price elasticity. So in college, the way they normally teach it is to take like any point along the demand curve and to calculate that. But in the CFA program, they take like the midpoint. So you'd have like Q1 and Q2 and P1 and P2, and you would use that to calculate your and they call that the arc elasticity of demand. So maybe not your best use of your time, especially as you're kind of rolling into the exam. The other thing too is that there aren't a lot of concepts from econ that have overlap with other areas. There really isn't. There's one part which ties into equity, which talks about if you're heading into, if you have a lot of inflation, would you invest in cyclical stocks or defensive stocks? So I saw a question like that the other day, and they said you should invest in cyclical stocks. But then there's a little caveat, but we're not sure how long this is going to last. And that reminds me of the third warning about econ is this: if the fact pattern is silent, always assume the short run effect, not the long run, unless they specifically ask for the long run. So again, the question was something like, if inflation is rising, would you rather be in defensive or cyclical stocks? And the answer read, you should be in cyclical stocks, right? Because you're going to benefit a little bit more from that expansion or that volatility, and vice versa with defensive stocks when things cool down a little bit. But then you might be thinking about timing. Well, where are we exactly in the economic cycle, right? Because timing, of course, is really important too. So so again, econ can be a little bit frustrating. And then also to add to the frustration is you have like the neoclassical Austrian school of thought, Keynesian, monetarists. So you have to be careful. Well, what view are we taking about, right, the economy and whether we should get involved or not? Okay. Now, speaking of overlap, I did talk about something, and I want to add it to the list here, is quantitative methods. I just want to double check the weightage for quantitative methods. Let's see here really quickly, make sure I got it right. Yeah, level 1, 8 to 12. Okay. So quantitative methods is 8 to 12. I'm just going to create a little bit of space here. Actually, I'll just move to the next slide here. Okay. Oh, speaking of statistics, there we go. So just ignore that for a second. So we have quantitative methods at 8 to 12. Now, a big part of stats is time value of money. Now, on time value of money, we learn things like compounding and discounting. Now, in equity and in fixed income, and then also in corporate finance, And like I said, also at level 2 in alternative investments, you're going to take some type of future cash flow and you're going to discount it, back to the present, 1 plus R to the N plus ... maybe going on to infinity, or maybe it's a finite project. But this whole idea here about discounting, when you divide by 1 plus R to the N, this is fundamental. This is a fundamental concept that we learn in time value of money. So I'm just going to go back and I would add to your list here, when we talk about anywhere between 31 and 41%, if you add another 8 to 12, well, what would that put us at? That would put us at, on the high end, 41 and 12, that would put us at potentially 53%. Okay? Cut it off a little bit, because in QM, we don't just have time value of money. We also have some hypothesis testing, calculating confidence intervals and some kind of like pure stats kind of stuff. So if we pull that out, still potentially you could be close to 50%. You add 15 to 20 from ethics, and you go on the high end, 20 and 53, that's 70% potentially. That's a lot. That's like a pass in my books, right? So on the other topics like econ, and another one that is a little bit, can be a little bit touchy-feely, portfolio management, talking about like this optimal or fully diversified portfolio. There's a lot of theoretical stuff, which again is a little bit contentious. What is our risk-free rate? Is it a T-bill? Is it a T-bond? Is it a T-note? What is our market portfolio? Is it the S&P, the Standard & Poor 500? Is it the SGX 300, right? Is it the Malaysian index? What is it? What is that? So there's a lot of like theoretical stuff where you just kind of like memorize it at level 1, but there's not a lot of understanding, I would find, in econ as well as portfolio management. So just be a little bit careful with portfolio management, except of course the piece where they get into the capital asset pricing model, which of course there's overlap. You'll see overlap with corporate finance and with equity. Okay, so Bing Hoi, I don't know if you want to jump in at all. One of the things I want to do here, I'm going to pull back and get clean this up a little bit. So hopefully that's okay. All right, so while I'm doing that, I don't know if Bing Hoi or anyone wants to add anything, but I just have some further thoughts about the order in which you want to be doing things. So now, of course, the earliest that some of you can write. So actually, can we get a little update? What is the status in Malaysia for writing the exam? Because in Vancouver and Singapore, it's pushed till next year. So before I get into it, I just want to be clear. I'm sorry, I should have clarified this earlier. Where are we at with that? What's the latest news in your part of the world?
Yeah, Malaysia is still on. The exams are still carrying on in Malaysia at the moment, but we don't know, right? You never know. Maybe in a couple of weeks' time, things may take a turn for worse. It's already, the cases in Malaysia are already increasing to a few hundred a day recently.
Okay, thank you, Sifu, for that. So folks, as Jackie Chan likes to say, be prepared for the worst, okay, and hope for the best. So hopefully you get to write in December, but if you don't, it'll be in February. Okay, good, thanks for that. Okay, so those of you writing in December, what do we got in terms of timing? Okay, so you should be, you should actually be in your kind of heading into your revision stage. Usually I say by Halloween. Okay, so by October 31st, around that time, you should be starting your, final revision, as it were. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to be going to the CFA website, and you want to be doing they used to call them topic tests. Now, like Bing Hoi and I don't have access to this because obviously we're no longer candidates. But look under the ecosystem. I think that's the name that they go by now. And what you're going to find there, folks, under the CFA website, is you're going to find they've actually got about 1,000 questions now, maybe more. My understanding is that they kept on adding to it. It could be even 2,000 now, but I'm going to say 1,000 just to play it safe. Now, these questions are really, really good. Really good. And then the other thing is you want to download the 3 mocks. Okay, so make sure you download them, or if they're not available for download, then what you want to do is you want to wait for the final 2 weeks to write those, because those are going to be your best exams. Those presumably, you might wonder why, but perhaps for obvious reasons. They're written by the Institute. They're probably free largely from errata, like mistakes. They're probably largely free of bias and being too generic, so these would be your best mock exams. So prior to that, though, you don't just want to write 3 mocks, you want to write between 6 to 9. So years ago, I had a cohort that was 31 strong in Vancouver, and I just did a study, and fortunately everybody got back to me except for this one student. And it was interesting because I thought maybe they'd failed and they tried to avoid me, but they'd just gone back home. I think they went back to Taiwan, I think it was. And what's interesting, folks, is what I found is that the passing rate for my class was 100%. No, it actually wasn't that different from the average. But what we did find is that students who did between 6 to 9 mocks is that they passed at double. Okay, they passed at double the posted rate. So I think that year, if the posted rate was, it was pretty low that year. I think it was like 42. It was a tough year. So I think in that cohort, it was around 80%. Those that did 6 to 9 passed at like double that rate. Now again, I always have to. There's always that caveat. That was I guess it was a robust sample size because it was 30. Remember in stats, right? Anyway, I'm not going to nerd out, but I guess it's a robust sample size, as it were. But nevertheless, there are no guarantees. That will repeat itself. But I want to make sure that you do plan to do somewhere between 6 to 9 mock exams. So you got 3 from the Institute. So go get your mock exams elsewhere in addition to that. So obviously you got, well, before I say Wiley, I have to disclose under standard 6C, I think it is, that I am effectively in a referral fee arrangement with them. So you might remember from referral fee arrangements. But nevertheless, maybe I don't need to do that, but I do it just to be super ethical, and I think it's the right thing to do. So having said that, you have Wiley mocks, and then you have the other guys, you know who they are. And then also you have society mocks, like Boston Society offers one. I think it's around 149 US. You might think it's a little bit pricey, but then there's the old expression, a pound shy, a penny foolish, especially these days, because if you don't clear in December, no pressure, but then obviously you'd have to write the CBT exam going forward. So might as well get her done. Okay, and then also check with your local society. So I don't know if Michelle or Andrew or if Beng Hui can comment about whether the local society is offering mocks. Like in Vancouver, we offer a few mocks, but I'll just leave that maybe for a later piece. But if your local society offers some mocks, and usually they offer them at a discount, that would be a good option. Like as an example, in Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton and other places that I don't know of for sure at the moment, but they will offer like the Kaplan mock, the Wiley mock, and the Boston mock, and again usually at a discounted price. So just check that out. That might be an option. Okay, but nevertheless, you want to get up to 6 to 9 mocks. Seriously, I think it's probably the biggest. I don't know if it's a secret, but tip that I can share with you. Just mocks. Just mock your brains out, okay? And then when you do your first couple of mocks, you're going to find that your scores are going to be right in the frickin' toilet, okay? You're going to go like 40%, up to 50, down to 40, up to 60, right? Down to 50, and then you're going to start bumping into the 70s. And that's when you get into that 6 to 9. You're going to start bumping into the 70s, and then you're going to fall back. This is just a general comment here, on average, then you're going to fall back and you might write one in the 60s. And this is where students really freak out, is that they might even get one in the 50s. And that could be mock number 7. And that's when students get a lot of anxiety, but that's okay. Go write another one, right? And then you'll get back into the 70s. Okay, good. All right. Because folks, there are about 600 LOSs. And of course, there are only 240 questions. So how do they examine all 600? Well, folks, they can't. Okay. So that's why it's so important to write a number of mock exams so that you can get exposure to those maybe it's like 570 LOSs. I'm not sure right now. But if you write enough mocks, then you'll get exposure. So if you think about it, with 240 questions and 600 LOSs, you really need to write at least 6 mocks so that you can see the same concept examined twice on average. Okay. If you do 9 mocks, then you might see the same concept, let's say 3 times. So let's say the first time you see a question on NPV versus IRR. So you write it the first time, you get it wrong. You write it the second time, you still get it wrong. You're like, damn it, you got me once, you got me twice, you're sure as heck not getting me thrice, right? So if you get up to the 9 mocks, then maybe you see it again, and that time you get it right. And then you walk into the exam with confidence. Okay. All right. Now, what else do you want to do? Again, as I said, they have revisions. So check with your society to see what type of revisions they might support or promote. Obviously, with AV Maximus and Sunway, we offer a revision. So that's one that I would highly recommend. And especially given the circumstances, I'm actually promoting the revisions, whether they're ours or others. I'm promoting them more heavily than I did before, because I really want you folks to be successful in December and not to have to write the same exam in a different format next year, assuming that we're going to run in December, which I hope you get to. I really do in Malaysia. Hopefully you get to write it. Okay, but if you don't, well, we've got you covered as well. We'll figure it out. All right, so I checked with my buddy Olinto, someone that Bing Hoi and I and Andrew and Michelle and others have worked with for many years now. And his advice, because I just checked with him the other day, and he says, okay, so he goes, tell students to regularly visit the CFA Institute website for mock exams that simulate the CBT experience. Okay, so for those of you who are not writing in December, but you're going to write in February, is again, so I guess it's quite dynamic. Maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but if you are going to write in February, then make sure you check the CFA Institute regularly. So I guess what they're trying to do, and Beng Hoi, this is a little takeaway perhaps for all of us, is that anyone writing next year, is that we encourage them to regularly visit the Institute website. And I guess I'm guessing it's like the ecosystem that I referred to earlier. You're looking for mock exams that simulate the CBT experience. And then the other thing, of course, he reminded me to remind you folks is that the content in 2021 hasn't changed. So if you are writing next year and you write level 1 again, not to worry, it's the same content, which is a major relief for instructors as well, because with so much going on, it's kind of nice that the Institute didn't change the candidate body of knowledge. Okay, so there are a few other ideas in my brain, in terms of what you should be doing between now and October 31st. So you have about 2 to 3 weeks. What do you want to do? You want to wrap it up, folks. Okay, so if you're in portfolio management, if you're in derivatives, wrap it up. Get it done. Read the study guide. So whatever study guide you might be using, and may the Lord be with you if you're reading the CFA readings. But nevertheless, if you're reading a study guide, which most students do for levels 1 and 2, you want to wrap that up. So if you've dialed back and taken the foot off the gas pedal because you're worried about, the exam might not be in December, you have to shake that off. You have to get back on the horse and you have to ride. And you want to get your not final revision, but you want to put, maybe it's your first run through or maybe it's your second run through of the material, get it done. Okay, get it done by October 31st, and that'll leave you all of November to do mocks. as well as to do the 1,000 questions or whatever they have now in the CFA ecosystem. Okay, so in November, you don't want to be doing like Kaplan Test Bank, or what do they call it, QBank. You don't want to be doing Wiley Test Bank. You want to get as many of those done now in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then from in November on, you really want to be doing as much as possible CFA materials, whether it's their single shot multiple choice questions or their mock exams. But again, don't do their mock exams until the final 2 weeks. Again, for perhaps obvious reasons that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so those are the marching orders. So I don't know if I want to pass it back and bring the Sifu, bring Hoy back into the conversation, or if Michelle, you want to come back in. I'll send it back to you folks.
Okay, thank you very much, Darren. Really fantastic advice there for folks who are taking the exams, whether it is in December, just round the corner, or it's early next year. Okay, I've got a couple of slides that I want to share with all of you, especially if you are new to the program. But I'm just going to summarize because we don't have much time today. So I've got like 16 slides, but I'm going to run through quite quickly on these slides. Well, especially for those who are new to the program. So basically, ourselves, together with Darren and Sunway, we've been working in KL, offering the CFA program for the past 10 years. But of course, for us as a company, we've been running this for a long, long time, more than 20 years. Okay, we can skip 2 slides. Okay, the next 2 slides, please. Yeah. Okay, so just very quickly, just to recap something that Darren just mentioned a while ago about the curriculum. Yes, so for the first time ever, CFA Institute is not going to change the curriculum for the next exam, right? Because for the last like 50 years, every year, the syllabus gets updated at all the levels. So what has changed between 2019 and 2020/21 actually is also quite minimal for level 1. Most of the changes actually came in to level 3. And 30% changes in content is very unusual, but then these are unusual times anyway, which means in the next couple of years, I don't expect a significant change even for level 2 and 3. Okay, next
Agreed.
slide. Okay, so this is for level 2. I guess probably, I don't think any of you are taking level 2. I mean, if some of you are taking level 2, it's actually very minimal changes as well between 2019 and 2020. Next slide.
Yeah, just to add to that, those are all like definitional type readings, all definitional. What is big data? What is AI? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Yep. So as mentioned, most of the changes came in at level 3. Okay, next. Okay, this is the interesting one that I think Darren spent quite a bit of time on it. So whatever he mentioned, very, very important, right? We need to study smart. And also what is different this time around in 2020-21 is that there is a range of weightage for level 1. Previously, we pretty much know exactly how many questions will come out, but now it's going to be a range. But that doesn't change the strategy. As what Darren mentioned, the focus should be on the core topics and the topics that will be kind of overlapping into the next level, like level 2. And as mentioned earlier, ethics is the best, right? All 3 levels, you got pretty good weightage there. And the best news, of course, is that level 2 more or less covers the level 1 ethics material, plus they put in some cases, right? And level 3 is quite the same. Same level 1 and 2 stuff, and they put in some additional cases. So essentially, whatever you have learned in level 1 ethics can be applied all 3 levels, right? So that's fantastic. Next slide. Okay, so in case, touch wood, you can't write the December exam for level 1, they're going to do it in February, and then again in May. And chances are most likely it's going to take place in February. Why? Because it's going to be computer-based. And with computer-based, they will spread the candidates over several days, right? So therefore, they don't concentrate like 1,000 people in the exam hall on one day anymore. So this December will be the last time. And next year onwards, people will be spread over several days at a computer center. All right, so it's a much smaller venue over several days. Okay, next. Okay, so here are some dates, pretty small if you're looking at it from your mobile phones, but not to worry. You can actually find all these dates from the CFA Institute website. But anyway, February dates is February 16 to 1st March. That's the exam window, right? So quite a few days there. Next slide. Okay, so this one talks about the time you're given, right? So all this while until this December, you've got 3 hours in the morning, you've got a 2-hour break in between, and then you have another 3 hours in the afternoon, right? But from next year onwards with computer-based testing, the time spent at the testing center is not 7 hours or 8 hours. It's just going to be 5.5 hours. So the in-between time is shorter, and each exam time is also shorter. All right. So it's 135 minutes for each half of the exam. So which means fewer number of questions as well. Next slide. Okay, this one, the text is pretty small as well, but essentially, yeah, from 240 questions, it goes down to 180 questions. But that doesn't make the exam any easier. Same level of difficulty, same multiple choice as well. And getting to the last few slides, and then we want to do a Q&A and spend some time there. Okay, I'm going to skip this one to the next slide. The next slide, please. Okay, so we have some okay, the next slide, yeah. So for those of you who kind of missed the exam preparation or haven't enrolled in any programs yet, next slide, please. So we've got some classes, some dates for next year. So Michelle and Andrew, they have already planned the schedule. So this will be the regular classes. Basically, the next intake prepares candidates for the May examination. For those who are taking the February examination, we are not running the full regular class, but of course, you can still access the materials. They are still accessible if you're a current candidate, and if it's postponed to next year, February, for example, or whichever exam it is, you're still able to access the materials you've been given. So not to worry. So this is the level 1 class. Next slide is the level 2 dates on the next slide, and the next slide is level 3. So after this presentation, you will be able to get more details about the dates. If you have questions, you can certainly ask Michelle, Andrew, any of us concerning the timetable, what materials are provided, and so on. I just want to get to the final slide on contact information. Okay, yeah. So here's Andrew's email at AB Maximus. We have a colleague, Raymond. He's not in this call today. He's based in Singapore. Andrew is based in KL. And of course, you can contact Michelle anytime. And you want to know more information about our Singapore programs, our website is there. So I'm kind of rushing through Apologies for that. That's because I want to have a kind of a chat together with Darren Degraaf. He shared quite a few interesting strategies just now. Very, very good. I've also taken a few points, kind of jog my memory. Okay, there are a couple of interesting things about level 2, why people think is the hardest. It's a perception, right? Okay, so imagine you're coming out from college and you're doing level 1. So most of the level 1 stuff is pretty much what you might learn at university for whatever subjects it is. So it's not like rocket science when you do level 1. Okay, so you don't really feel it's difficult. But when you get to level 2, suddenly the level of difficulty kind of goes up from what you've learned at college or university. So you feel or you perceive that, hey, it's difficult, right? Because the level of difficulty has indeed gone up. And then between level 2 and 3, that increase in level of difficulty, it's quite minimal. Instead, at level 3, you kind of learn some other stuff that is quite new or different. And level 3 really benefits those folks who are actually working in the finance or investment industry, right? So that's the level of difficulty perception. That's what I think. Okay, preparation time. 300 hours, right? There's this website called 300 Hours, gives you some tips. CFA Institute and some others have said, hey, yeah, 300 hours is kind of the average time. But from our point of view, well, I think that 300 hours is probably about right if you come from a finance or accounting background. If you come from an engineering or arts or science, then certainly you need more than 300 hours, right? Because you need that additional hours to bring yourself up on par with the rest of the folks who have done some statistics or some equity or some econs back in university. Okay, so 300 hours or more. Well, of course, there are some geniuses out there who don't need 300 hours. Maybe they just attend a couple of lessons and then they do the 6 or 9 mocks and then they can make it. Okay, that's great. But here's the thing. We've got some of these more advanced students, whether they're based in Singapore, Malaysia, Vancouver, London. If they prepare for level 1 just by doing mocks alone, but without that solid foundation, as you progress up to the higher levels, you will find it difficult. All right. So whilst it may work without studying too much, but just by doing questions in level 1, let us assure you, at level 3, that's not going to be the case. Okay, you need that solid foundation. So that's important, right? You can do some shortcuts, but not all the time. Okay, practice makes perfect, right? So that do those questions is very important. Not to skip that. Okay, so I'm not sure if there are questions coming from the floor. I mean, we've been talking nonstop for the last between us last 1 hour. If you guys have any questions or comments, okay, I see one from Jasper. He mentions that the ecosystem only provides 3 mocks. The ecosystem from CFA Institute, right? So where can we get more CFA mocks? Darren, you want to take this one?
Yeah, okay. So again, I'm not sure what the local society does in Malaysia and Singapore there, but some societies will offer mocks. So they'll offer like the Kaplan mock, the Wiley mock, and maybe even the Boston Society mock. Now, failing that, you want to check with the usual suspects. You want to check with Kaplan, check with Wiley, and then, but probably not too far beyond that, because any other of the small players, they presumably might have more errata. Just simply because in the smaller shops, it's hard for them to be able to, to vet the materials. That's all I got for that.
Or they might be using old recycled questions. the best source of questions will be from the examiner, right? CFA Institute. Then the next step, of course, is, well, if you're part of the program with Sunway, the Wiley mocks are bundled with it. You have access to that. If you're not with the program, of course, you can still sign up only for revision and mock exam through Sunway. That's available as well. I understand that the local societies in both Singapore and Malaysia, they also offer both Wiley and also the Schweizer mock as well. So more than enough questions that you can get your hands on, right? There's one other thing that not mentioned this 1 hour is also trying out the back of chapter questions. So this is worth doing while you are in the regular week-to-week studying and revision. But like what Darren said, in that last couple of weeks, you just want to focus on the examination. You're in the exam mode, basically. So the back of chapter questions are more of testing of concepts. But these are important, right? Because many examiners, they do take inspiration from the textbook, all right? So yeah, okay. Lilia Tan asked, are there any resources available for February 2021 if they are self-studying, since we are not running the full revision for the February candidates? Okay, so in Sunway, Malaysia, we are not running classes. In Singapore, EB Maximus is running classes, but of course, but those classes are starting like in November. But anyway, no worries. Please get in contact with Michelle or Andrew. We will point you to some resources that are available. For us, I mean, we've been doing this for the longest time. And of course, if there are candidates who want help, we will try to find somewhere to provide some kind of revision or some kind of mock practice or whatever it is, all right, so that candidates get prepared. Okay, so do reach out to Michelle or Andrew. Yeah. Okay. While you guys are still thinking, we kind of overshot by 5 minutes. I think we probably want to take a couple more minutes. I'm not sure if you still have questions. We will welcome them.
Yeah, Sifu, I don't know if you wanted to. I know you usually compliment my pieces on level 2 being kind of like the tougher exam and the myth and stuff like that. And also maybe in terms of standard setting and also the the myth or the reality. Again, it's always speculation. We have to be careful with that, of course, but of writing when the institute used to write the questions and perhaps how yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got it right, Darren. So it's like typically about a year to 9 months before the exam that the questions are developed. So it's like what Darren mentioned, what's happening last year, a year ago, 9 months ago. But that is for the June cycle, right? So what about December cycle? What I can say is it's probably taken from the same question bank.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it's probably a year ago. If you're taking the December, it's probably what's happened a year ago. That's when they start setting those questions. Last September, last August, last July, for example, right? So it's 9 months to a year. But usually, this kind of more recent kind of cases will more or less appear in the higher levels.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Because that's when they get a chance to really, elaborate on the case. Whereas for the level 1 standalone questions, I don't think they want to invest too much resources into it. So it's kind of more, very standard questions that they use. Yeah, but anyway, not to worry too much about that. So in level 3, as you guys know, most of you are level 1, some in level 2. But in level 3, that's when the exam format changes, right? To 50% into, you need to write, right? They call it like essay. This is where even at level 1, you should start to think about that too, because it's not going to be like standalone questions forever. Things do that more difficult, as what Darren said, because in level 2, from a standalone questions, it becomes a set of questions based on the case. All right, and then level 3 part of it is as essay, but of course that's going to change when you have the computer based as well. But then again, yeah, the complexity of it will be similar, right? In level 3, it's not going to be so simple as in level 1. Okay, the standard setting, right? Okay, so this minimum passing score is something that is what Darren mentioned. They do not reveal it. What is the formula to arrive at what is that passing score? Is it 60, 63, 65? Firstly, they don't disclose it. Secondly, they don't disclose the methodology behind it. Now, what is being done really is the term called standard setting, all right? Which means besides the examiners themselves coming out with the exam questions, they do actually get some people to take the exam, all right? Okay, I wouldn't call them guinea pigs, but there are some test takers, and some of these test takers are actually charter holders, right? Okay, so we don't know who these people are. Okay, we don't know. So that comes back, and it goes back into the feedback mechanism. So if these test takers or the standard setting finds that, hey, this year the questions are really, really tough, or this year the questions are really, really easy. So there's some kind of adjustment thing. Why are they doing this? Is because to ensure that the standard from year to year, the standard of difficulty of the exam from year to year remains as consistent as possible. Correct. So that whether we passed it like long time ago, or you passed it like last year, or it's going to be for next year, that standard is maintained. Right? That's why it's called standard setting. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I can say. So there is no like quota. There's no quota to say that, oh, this year they're gonna pass 40% of the people or 50% of the people. They're just gonna come up with what is this minimum standard. If you make it, you make it. All right. But what we see is a trend, right? Every year there's a downtrend, right? Kind of stabilizing the last 5 years now. It's around 45 to 50% of the people who take level 1 will pass. Okay, you might think, hey, this is a very low number. The actual number of passes are even lower because let's say it's 50%, okay? But guess what? 20% of the people in level 1 do not show up on exam day. So actually out of 100, only 80 show up. And out of 80, only like say 40 or 35 will pass, all right? So, but that is a statistic. I would say most of the people, at least those in our classes, or those who are well prepared, they are the ones who show up, right? Those who don't show up are those who like just trying their luck, not preparing the weekly classes at all. Whether you're coming for classes or you're doing self-study, not prepared, so they don't want to torture themselves on the exam day. Okay, yeah. So there's some insight that we want to share. As long as you are well prepared, you do the regular lessons, regular self-study, practice questions in between, not wait till last minute, do your mock exams, have a revision, form a study group. If you're doing self-study, form a study group. If you're in our class, you already know that we have that study group and the WhatsApp group linked everybody together with Darren and the several instructors and Andrew and everybody. So the peer-to-peer help is there. The peer-to-instructor help is there. All right. So we've kind of got you covered, in other words. Okay,
for sure.
I'm just going to stop here. Darren, over to you.
I was just going to say, so I just saw in the internal chat here. So folks, there's something called studylisa.com. So the old www, whatever, study Lisa, all one word, LISA.com. And apparently the local society, at least in Malaysia, is promoting that to the local candidates. So again, it's studylisa.com. Yeah, so just in addition to what Beng
Who's
Hoi
that?
mentioned about. Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah, my daughter's
Yeah.
name is Lisa. I got a sister named
Yeah.
Lisa. That's a good name.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not sure who it is. Anyway, no worries.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, guys. So I guess probably that's about it for now. But no worries. In case you have missed anything, you still need help. Feel free once again to contact Michelle and Andrew. We're always there to help you guys out anytime. And Darren, thanks a lot for waking up so early
No, no
in
problem. My
in
pleasure. Yeah,
Vancouver right now. It must be starting to freeze, right? It's like below 10 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. We're up in Whistler just this past weekend, and we actually got some snow up there, so it was nice.
In Whistler. Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Nice. Nice.
yeah. Thank you, though. Pleasure, Beng Hoi, as usual.
Okay. Cheers.
Take care, folks. See you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.